Hello everyone, I'm Brian Croydragon and welcome to today's Truth or Scare commentary. The episode is Real Riches, which I remember, as always, Curious Rich documentary was reformatted. So without further ado, let's get started.
Magical spells, mysterious powers, strange rituals. Stories about witches have been scaring people for a long, long time. Is there really anything to be afraid of? Get ready to discover the chilling history of witches, the myths, the legends, the terrifying truth. And meet the witches of today who keep the mysterious ancient traditions alive. Are you prepared to face your fears? Because Truth or Scare is going to face the truth about witches. Witches, wizards, warlocks. They've been known since the Stone Age for mysterious rituals, spells, and their belief they can bend the forces of nature. Today, witches are the subject of best-selling books, video games, movies, and of course, TV shows. But stories have been told about them for centuries, and the true history of witches is the most shocking story of all. But to try and get to the truth, we have to go back to the beginning, to a time before history itself, where their mystical traditions were born. Egyptian priests, African shamans, and the secretive, mysterious druids in the United Kingdom and Europe were just some of the many who claimed they could cast magic spells, predict the future, or even control the forces of nature. And they tried to use these powers to make people's hard lives just a little bit easier. Nothing scary about that. Could they actually do these things? No one knows for sure, but some claim their magic has done remarkable things. Like Stonehenge, a massive stone structure in England that some believe was built by the Druids. According to legend, a wizard named Merlin, who some say was a druid himself, magically transported the stones here from hundreds of miles away. Hard to believe? Well, geologists have examined Stonehenge, and they confirmed that some of the huge stones did come from distant lands in Wales. In light of this fact, many today remain convinced that the stones were moved by Merlin's supernatural powers. But others say someone or something else must have moved them. Some theories state that humans had the capability of moving the stones by other methods, without magic. We may never know if it was magic that built Stonehenge, but we do know this. In the year 1000 AD, Christianity became popular in the British Isles, and things started to change for the people who practiced the mystical arts. They were looked at suspiciously and labeled witches. By 1563, British law made being a witch illegal. A few years later, King James made new laws that said witches were under the control of demonic forces.
King James,
Now, if you were accused of being a witch, it was serious business.
1563
You might be found guilty in a trial,
Elizabeth's
or
reign.
even tortured until you confessed. Either way, your fate was usually the same. It was madness. But thankfully, it didn't last long. In less than 100 years, England had stopped executing people for being witches. But people's fear of witches didn't disappear completely. In fact, it traveled across the Atlantic Ocean, bringing hysteria to the New World. Late at night, did a group of girls actually come under attack by witches? Salem, Massachusetts is plunged into madness. Next on Truth or Scare. What if you could be tricked into becoming a witch? When the Puritans came to the New World from England, they brought along their belief that the devil had power over everyone. And in 1692, many say that belief drove the town of Salem, Massachusetts to the edge of insanity. The Puritans had come to New England in the late 1600s to live a simple and religious life. Many of them settled in Salem, Massachusetts. But towards the end of the century, some Puritans in Salem didn't like what they saw happening. The town was growing and changing. The port was filled with ships, and new businesses were booming. Many felt this prosperity would harm the pure, simple life they had come for, and historians say this made them fear that the town might be under the influence of the devil. The belief was that he could trick you into signing his book. After that, you'd be given dangerous magical powers. Powers you could use to hurt other people, even kill them. You would be a witch. Was the devil at work in Salem? Samuel Parris thought so, and said so. He was the top minister in town, and many say his sermons made a lot of people suspicious of their neighbors. The situation was getting tense. And then it exploded. On a cold winter's night in 1692, in the minister's own home, the hysteria began. Reverend Parris's 9-year-old daughter, Betty, and her friends were having their fortunes told by Tituba, the minister's slave. The only problem was, fortune-telling was forbidden. But Betty and her friends didn't care. They were spellbound. But then suddenly, one of the girls saw something. Floating in the air was the terrifying vision of a white coffin. But the terror was only beginning. Betty began to have convulsions, flailing, shaking, thrashing, and screaming, like she was being attacked by some terrifying, invisible creature. Then, the same thing started with Abigail, her 11-year-old cousin. Uncontrollable, horrifying fits, totally out of nowhere. Reverend Parris sent for the village doctor, but he couldn't find anything wrong with the girls. For a Puritan in 1692, that left only one explanation. The evil hand is upon them, he said. He meant, of course, the evil hand of a witch. Over the next few days, none of the girls got better. And then, other girls in the village suddenly became afflicted too. Reverend Parris brought in other ministers to help him, and demanded that the girls tell them who had cast this evil spell. Tired and desperate, the girls broke down and named 3 names.
Tituba.
Tituba.
One was Reverend Parris's fortune-telling slave.
Are there others?
Sarah Good.
One was a beggar.
And are there others?
Sarah Uspen.
And the other was a sick old woman who had shocked the town when she married one of her servants. On February 29th, the 3 women were officially arrested for being witches and brought to the town meeting house to face the charges. Reverend Parris's slave, Tituba, was brought before the magistrate, and for the first time ever in Salem, someone confessed to being a witch.
The devil came to me and bid me serve him.
Not only did Tituba claim that she served the devil, she confirmed the girls' stories that Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne were also witches. And She gave wild descriptions of how they all rode on broomsticks to their meetings with the devil in Reverend Paris's pasture. But the biggest bombshell was her claim that there were other witches at these meetings, witches that she couldn't recognize. Who were those other witches? Suddenly, it seemed like anyone might be accused. And starting on March 1st, 1692, that's exactly what started to happen. The witch hunt
to my
had
knowledge,
begun.
Tituba was black, and that woman looks pretty damn white.
It's
I
neighbor
don't
against
know
neighbor as the witch trials
what's
begin,
going on here.
and death comes to Salem.
But yeah, she looks pretty
Next
damn
on
white
Truth or
to me,
Scare.
so...
Imagine if you could lose your life just because someone said you were a witch. Well, in 1692 in Salem, the claims of the girls in the attic shocked the entire town. Now the question was, were they telling the truth? Historians say it didn't really matter. None of the accused witches were given lawyers, and all of them were pretty much seen as guilty until proven innocent. Their moles, warts, even their zits were seen as marks of evil. And even if their skin was clear, they still couldn't escape what the court said was the most incriminating evidence of all. It was called spectral evidence. The things that the girls said they saw were taken as cold, hard fact. Ann Putnam, who had been in the attic that night, testified against Sarah Good.
I saw the apparition of Sarah Good. She did torture me most grievously. She did pinch me and prick me and urge me vehemently to write in her book.
Once the trial started, the accusations didn't stop. Even some adults were starting to point the finger, and it seemed like everyone was a suspect. Even Rebecca Nurse. She was a grandmother and a respected member of the church. But when Ann Putnam accused her of being a witch, this frail 71-year-old woman was dragged to court to face the charges.
Ann Putnam, have you seen this woman hurt you?
Yes, she beat me this morning.
Rebecca Nurse, do you not see these afflicted persons and hear them accuse you?
The good Lord knows I have not hurt them. I am an innocent person.
She was then found guilty. Many say that the people of Salem had completely lost their grip on reality. Even family ties meant nothing. Sarah Good's 5-year-old daughter testified that her mother had actually recruited her to be a witch. Then, a local farmer was arrested, put on trial, and convicted, all based on his granddaughter's testimony. Over the summer of 1692, a total of 19 people were convicted and hanged for being witches, including a minister. As the convictions piled up, historians say that some of the accused were so desperate to escape hanging, they confessed. Confessing bought them some time. Time, they hoped, would give Salem a chance to come to its senses. And by the end of 1692, it did. Ministers all over Massachusetts began to question the evidence that had been presented, especially the spectral evidence, all those spirits that only the girls could see. One of the judges even quit. Finally, when the governor's wife was accused, it was clear that the nightmare of the witch hunt needed to end. Increase Mather, one of the most powerful ministers in Massachusetts, delivered a famous sermon in which he said,
"It were better that 10 suspected witches should go free than that one innocent person die. I'd rather judge a witch to be an honest woman than judge an honest woman to be a witch."
On October 29th, 1692, the witch hunt was officially over. All the accused witches were let out of jail, and the convicted witches were pardoned. In 8 short months, 200 people had been accused and put in jail. 20 had been executed, and 5 had died in prison. They would be the last people in America ever to be put to death for being witches.
Sorrow and offense.
In the end, a lot of the accusers blamed their actions on the devil. They claimed they had been tricked into believing their neighbors were witches.
We are apt to lose all that's good.
But many historians today believe that this dark chapter in American history was really the result of the Puritans' extreme views. Views that helped create the kind of fear that can easily become hysteria. Other people see a kind of evil plot. They point the finger at the Puritans who used what happened on that cold February night to eliminate their enemies. Could that explain the bizarre accusation of Rebecca Nurse? She had once refused to sell some land to Ann Putnam's powerful father. Had he now used his own daughter for revenge? The mystery remains. The greatest mystery of all, what did happen in the attic on that cold February night? Next on Truth or Scare. History has shown that no one in Salem who was accused of being a witch was a witch. But there are still some unanswered questions, like what really happened to the girls in that attic in 1692. No one questions that on that night, Betty Paris and her friends suddenly went into convulsions and had hallucinations they were being attacked. But now that we know it wasn't their witch neighbors causing it, is it possible that the whole thing was an act? Richard Trask is a descendant of one of the accused witches and an expert on the Salem witch trials. He believes that even though what was happening to the girls wasn't the devil, it was real.
This wasn't kids pretending. This wasn't just a poor acting on the part of the kids. This was something that was physically happening to them.
It had been reported that some of the girls actually had strange sores appear on their bodies. One theory says that the answer might be found in something they ate. Could a simple slice of bread have caused these girls to see evil? Maybe. Back then, rye bread sometimes had a nasty fungus called ergot. It's not a problem today, but according to historian Mary Matosian, in 1692, people who ate bad rye bread had bad things happen.
They have uncontrollable fits, spasms in their muscles, and uncontrollable writhing the whole body.
After that, hallucinations and the sensation that they are being bitten or poked by some sharp, invisible force.
And they frequently attribute these hallucinations to supernatural forces, usually evil.
And if the Puritans believed one thing, it was that witches were evil. And the rest, as they say, is Salem's tragic history. But it's a history that the town has learned from. Welcome back to modern-day Salem. But today, in the town where fear of witches destroyed so many lives, everything is different. Salem has embraced its past, and over 1 million visitors a year come here to experience its history for themselves, and maybe even get to meet a real witch. That's right, because even though all those people in 1692 were falsely accused of being witches, a growing community of people that openly call themselves witches feel right at home here in Salem. People like Laurie Cabot. And Laurie Cabot's not just any witch.
I'm the official witch of Salem, Massachusetts.
And what does it mean to be a witch? According to Laurie, it's not spooky at all. Just like the Druids, their ceremonies have nothing to do with evil or the devil, and never have.
We follow 2 major rules. Do what thou will and harm no one.
Witches, like Lori, also believe in the law of three. It says that anything they do that sends out energy, like spells or wishing for things, will come back to them 3 times more intensely.
The more generous you are, the more generous the world will be with you.
Put those 2 rules together, and it's pretty obvious that most modern-day witches want to do good, just like the ancient druids and those that came before them.
May all blessings be yours. So mote it be.
Modern witches perform rituals that they believe can solve problems and help to change things about their lives. It's a lot like saying a prayer.
By earth, fire.
Lori starts by casting a circle. This is a way of focusing her energy on the spell. Modern witches like Lori say they conduct their ceremonies outdoors to be closer to the earth. And many of them believe there is an energy that flows through every living thing in the universe. These mystical ceremonies celebrate and respect nature, just like they did in the times of the Druids. And they link the witches of today with those who first practiced the mystical arts. It looks like the history of witches has come full circle, because both ancient and modern witches claim to harness nature through spells and rituals to improve their lives. But is their magic real? That's up to you to decide. But real or not, witches will always have the power to cast spells over our imaginations.
As always, I get absorbed into the subject and I don't really do that much commenting on it, but yeah, not sure about the woman who played Tituba. Certainly don't believe witches to be evil. And bad rye bread, yeah, that's seems very likely. I'm Brian Croy Dragon signing out. Stay straight.